In the early 1960s, the world watched two superpowers chase an impossible dream. The United States poured billions into NASA, its budget swelling to a historic 4.5% of federal spending in 1966. Every launch was broadcast, every success hailed as proof of democratic ingenuity. Each failure amplified doubts about American resolve. Across the continent, the Soviet Union pursued a parallel program under the watchful eye of the Space Committee and General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev. Propaganda on both sides turned space into a battlefield of ideology. Satellites already whispered secrets across continents, feeding intelligence that sharpened every decision. By 1968, the United States had prepared Apollo 11 for a July launch, while the Soviet lunar series was edging toward its own lunar landing. July 1969 unfolded under a sky heavy with tension. In Cape Canaveral, a Saturn V roared to life, carrying Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin toward a promised first step for humanity. Half a world away from the Baikonur cosmodrome, Luna 24 rose on a different trajectory. Its payload not just scientific instruments, but two cosmonauts, Alexei Leonov, famed for his historic spacewalk, and Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in orbit. The Soviet leadership had kept the mission's human components secret until the final countdown, fearing that an American triumph would cripple the communist narrative of superiority. When Luna 24 touched down in Mare Crisium, the world heard a thin crackle over Soviet shortwave. Cosmonauts Leonov and Tereshkova have landed. The transmission was brief, but its impact was seismic. Within hours, newspapers across the globe ran headlines that no longer spoke of an American first step, but of a Soviet one. The United States watched in stunned silence as its flagship mission circled the moon, now a secondary act to a reality already rewritten. The fallout was swift and multifaceted. In Washington, President Nixon faced a crisis not only of prestige, but of domestic confidence. NASA's budget, already under scrutiny from an increasingly war-torn Congress, saw new cuts as legislators demanded accountability for a program that no longer held the singular claim to glory. The Apollo crew, still in orbit, received orders to abort their lunar descent and return home, a decision that would be recorded as Apollo 11 aborted due to mission redundancy. In Moscow, Brezhnev seized the moment. State media painted the landing as proof of socialist scientific superiority, a triumph that validated years of investment despite the strain of the Vietnam War and lingering Cold War anxieties. The Soviet Space Committee received unprecedented funding. New research centers sprang up in Siberia and the Urals to support future lunar habitats. Internationally, allies recalibrated their diplomatic posture. Nations in the non-aligned movement, already wary of superpower competition, now viewed the USSR as the more capable partner for technological cooperation. The United Kingdom and West Germany, while still allied with Washington, began secret talks about joint scientific missions that could restore Western credibility. The psychological impact of a Soviet moonwalk rippled through every arena where ideology mattered. In Eastern Europe, citizens who had endured the harshness of Brezhnev's rule found a new source of pride. Posters displayed Leonov and Tereshkova standing on alien soil, their helmets reflecting the earth below. In the United States, public opinion polls showed a sharp dip in confidence about America's global leadership. The Vietnam conflict, already eroding support at home, now seemed part of a broader narrative of decline. The Soviet Union leveraged its achievement diplomatically. At the United Nations, Brezhnev delivered a speech that linked lunar conquest to peace, arguing that scientific advancement could only flourish under socialist planning. Western delegations found themselves on the defensive, forced to acknowledge a reality they had believed impossible just months earlier. With prestige rebalanced, both sides altered their technological trajectories. The United States, constrained by budget cuts and a war raging at home, shifted from ambitious lunar settlement plans toward Earth orbit research. The space shuttle concept, which in our timeline would emerge later, was accelerated as a cost-effective platform for low Earth operations. NASA's focus turned to satellite communications, already essential for intelligence, and to unmanned probes that could still claim scientific firsts without the expense of crewed lunar missions. The Soviet program, buoyed by its success, pressed onward with plans for a permanent base on the Moon within a decade. The Lunar 25 and Lunar 26 missions were redesigned as habitat modules, each carrying life support experiments and construction equipment. Brezhnev ordered that resources diverted to Vietnam be reallocated towards space infrastructure, betting that a tangible presence on the Moon would cement Soviet influence for generations. The altered balance of power reshaped diplomatic negotiations worldwide. Détente, which in our history began in the early 1970s, was delayed. The United States, now more defensive, sought arms control talks primarily to reduce the risk of nuclear escalation, not as a platform for broader cooperation. The Soviet Union, confident in its technological lead, entered negotiations from a position of strength, demanding concessions on missile deployments that would protect its newly claimed lunar foothold. In Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War continued unabated, but with a twist. The Soviet Union offered limited logistical support to North Vietnam, framing it as assistance for an ally that had proven itself capable of reaching beyond Earth. The United States, already stretched thin, found its resolve waning, leading to a gradual de-escalation in 1972 that was more a product of domestic pressure than diplomatic success. Beyond politics and budgets, the lunar landing left an indelible mark on culture. Soviet literature celebrated Leonov's poetic reflections from the Moon, while films imagined a future where socialist colonies thrived under domed habitats. In America, a wave of introspection emerged. Filmmakers turned to stories of resilience in the face of perceived defeat, and artists explored themes of identity detached from the notion of manifest destiny. Education systems on both sides adjusted curricula. Soviet schools emphasized space science as a civic duty, encouraging youth to view themselves as contributors to a grand socialist project. American classrooms, meanwhile, placed greater emphasis on problem-solving within constrained resources, teaching students that innovation could thrive without the guarantee of limitless funding. The decision made in July 1969 to send Leonov and Tereshkova to the Moon did more than alter a timeline. It reshaped the very fabric of international relations, technology, and collective imagination. The Soviet Union's triumph extended its ideological reach, compelling the United States to reassess not just its space ambitions, but its broader strategic posture. In the decades that followed, humanity continued to explore beyond Earth, yet the shadow of that divergent moment lingered in every launch, every policy debate, every artistic expression. Looking back from today, we see how a single mission can tilt the balance of power, redirect resources, and redefine what societies deem possible. The story reminds us that progress is never linear. It is forged in the tension between aspiration and circumstance. As we gaze once more at the Moon, we do so with the knowledge that its surface bears not only footprints, but the weight of choices that echo across history.